And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as tonight your Indiana Hoosiers open up the 2016-17 season with a riveting 101-97 victory over the Kansas Jayhawks in overtime in the Armed Forces Classic, an absolute heavyweight matchup between these two blue bloods of college basketball, number 3 Kansas, number 11 Indiana, and the Hoosiers gutted it out and found a way to win in what surely is a harbinger of a terrific season to come. And if there was any question about whether this was going to be a good team or a fun team or an exciting team, we can put all of those questions to bed tonight, because this Indiana team showed us exactly what they can be, and they revealed themselves to be a terrific team and a tough team. And we are going to break it all down on this fun, exuberant episode of the Assembly Call. Hey, games can end late at 12:45 Eastern time. It's not going to deter us. We're going to be here with excitement and enthusiasm after a performance like that, because my goodness, that was a fun way to start the season. I am your host, Jared Morris. I am here with our entire crew, Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips, and Will DeWitt. We will be your guides breaking down this IU-Kansas matchup that kicked off the 2016-17 season. And we will start, as we always do, with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And for me, the banner moment comes late in the second half. And it's really, there were several moments, but it was every single time James Blackman Jr. got the ball with Indiana needing a bucket and stepped up. Kansas took a lead at 82-81, and this came on the heels of Indiana. It was a seesaw game the entire way, but Indiana would get the lead and kind of have a little bit of a lull and struggle offensively. But that stopped in the second half when they just said, you know what, we've got this great scorer named James Blackman Jr. We're going to go let him get the ball and go get us a bucket when we need one. And it was 82-81. James knocked down a three to make it 84-82. And then the very next possession, it was late in the shot clock. James gets fouled on a three, makes all of them. So Indiana goes up 87-82. Basically, James put us in position to win the game. Now, Robert Johnson missed a couple free throws. Thomas Bryant fouled out, and Kansas was able to battle back to force overtime. But James was tremendous and continued it into the overtime. I don't know how many points he finished with. I think it was 26 points, 6 boards. He was only 8 of 17 from the field, but the efficiency didn't matter as much tonight as just the willingness to take and make big shots. We knew that was going to be missing without Yogi here. A big opportunity for someone else to step up. James Blackman Jr. did it. And if he can be that guy with what Thomas Bryant can bring and with what OG is going to bring, this three-headed monster for Indiana basketball is going to be really tough for anyone to contend with tonight. James Blackman Jr. was sensational. His play, especially in that second half, is our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And, of course, tonight's banner moment is brought to us by our friends at Hoosier Proud, an Indiana-based brand by Hoosiers for Hoosiers. If you consider yourself a Hoosier, and not just an IU Hoosier, but someone who is proud to have roots in the great state of Indiana, then you need to check out HoosierProud.com. Connor and the team at Hoosier Proud offer a line of T-shirts and accessories that are unmatched for anyone who wants a unique, stylish way to display their own pride in being a Hoosier. In fact, we like their products so much that we even moved production of our Assembly Call logo T-shirts to Hoosier Proud, because they produce high-quality work, care about their customers, and take pride in their Indiana roots like we do. Check them out at HoosierProud.com and use the promo code ASSEMBLY to receive a 15% discount on your entire order. That's promo code ASSEMBLY to receive 15% off at HoosierProud.com. All righty, let's move the ball and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. Andy, we go to you for our bottoms line, brought to us by bracketology.fm.
Oh, I'm not even sure I can breathe, let alone talk about this game. I'm gonna call out Jawan Morgan. I thought he was, in the first half, he helped them hang around when they got off to a slow start. He was the only guy that was more than a +2 in plus minus at halftime. I think he was +10. Ended best on IU's team for the game, at least on the one I'm looking at +15. I'll do the stats later and should finish sometime around when I eat breakfast tomorrow morning, or I guess this morning now. But I just thought Morgan, the Jawan Morgan things was a real thing tonight. 10 rebounds. I think 4 of those were on the offensive end, had 4 assists, ran some point, just 1 turnover, 1 steal, just had some big plays. Even on the opening tip of overtime, stepped in and kind of, knocked the ball over to IU. And I just thought he did a lot of great things, showed the versatility that's going to make him so valuable for IU this season. And just the way that he played, I thought was really good, because they got a really strong lift off the bench from he and the freshman, who I'm sure we'll get into as well. But I just thought he was, the kind of do it all Swiss Army knife type guy that we've talked about, and having a guy like that in a game like this against a really good team, it just gave IU the flexibility that I think allowed them to hang around and explore a lot of different lineups as they went through, which is also going to be the bane of my existence shortly when I get to doing these stats, all the lineups. But I just thought Morgan was fantastic, and a guy who might not get mentioned a ton, but a guy that we had high expectations for coming in, and one game in, he has most certainly lived up to it.
Yeah, he was terrific. Ryan, it's time for your rant, brought to us by thebiglead.com.
Yeah, for me, it was the story of this one, other than the fouls, which I'm sure somebody else is going to get into here pretty quick, was the freshman. I thought that while they didn't necessarily play huge roles in regulations, other than Curtis Jones, who, as a friend of the show, said essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, but his grapefruits are so gigantic he probably has a difficult time sitting down. Curtis Jones came in and played like he belonged the entire game, finished with 15 points in 16 minutes. But what impressed me the most was the freshman in overtime stepping up, with Thomas Bryant out, with Robert Johnson out, and then Jawan Morgan went out as well, all fouled out. And you had Curtis Jones, Devontae Green, and Deron Davis all step up and do immense things in overtime. Deron Davis hit 2 huge free throws, all the pressure in the world on him, just stepped up, nailed him. Curtis Jones, a couple possessions later, did the exact same thing. Devontae Green played really tough defense, really scrapped after the ball, kept the ball moving on the perimeter as well on offense. So you had these guys, they weren't just deferring to everybody else. They were involved, and they're a part of this team. And it's sometimes that, I'm not saying that as like I expected them not to be, but that's what freshmen do. They just kind of are on their own in the team and work their way in. Eventually, these guys were ready to go in this game against the number 3, or depending on which poll you're looking at, number 2 team in the country. That bodes well for Indiana. That was unbelievable to see those guys step up. They scrapped. They did not shrink at the moment. Overtime in Hawaii against Kansas, a team laden with experience, and these guys were just going toe-to-toe with the opposition. I thought it was fantastic to see, and bodes really well for the future for IU. Not just the rest of this season and the next couple weeks, but I'm talking years down the road, because these guys are not afraid. None of them are. And they just stood toe-to-toe with the number 2 team in the country and came out on top. And it was because of them. I mean, those veterans were gone in the overtime, and they stepped up. So I don't know. I just thought I was very impressed.
Wait, so you're telling me there were freshmen on the court other than Josh Jackson? I wasn't aware.
I surprisingly, our guys were freshmen too, and they were recruited too. Like, they actually were given scholarships. They were ranked by recruiting services, and they arrived on campus a few months ago. That's how that works. I'm not sure if ESPN was very detailed on that, but I mean, if you look at, speaking of Jackson, I mean, he's a phenomenal player. He played 27 minutes, only had 9 points. Curtis Jones had 15 in 16 minutes. Deron Davis had 4 huge points in 7 minutes. I mean, so they were right on par with this guy who's been heralded as a great player. And Jackson will be a great player, but you have to realize that this Indiana team, these kids went toe-to-toe with those guys and did not look like they didn't belong.
I think sarcastic wise-ass Ryan is my favorite Ryan, even after a big victory.
You mean Ryan all the time? Is that what you're...
Yeah. Will, let's go over to you.
That's standard issue, Ryan, to you.
Yes, it is. And I appreciate the restraint for not just going all in on the officials right off the bat. I appreciate that. We'll get to that later.
We'll get to there.
Yeah, we'll get there. Will, give us your stat of the night, brought to us by the Bears brothers.
Well, this might be a good time to bring in that official talk, because my stat of the game is going to have to be about the plethora of fouls that we had throughout this game. I mean, it was insane. It seemed like the whistle was blowing more times than it wasn't. For the entire game, there are 63 total fouls. Like Ryan said in the chat too, you just never see two teams, get into the 30s when it comes to their fouls. And on top of that, guys, 7 players fouled out of this game, which is, at one point, everyone was worried that we're going to run out of players, on both sides, and it's going to be, like you said, Jared, one-on-one towards the end of the game. But yeah, all those fouls for me is definitely going to be a stat of the game, because it definitely impacted the game more ways than one, and definitely impacted the flow, the momentum more times than not, and that's why it's going to be my stat of the game.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I gotta say real quick, I'm sure all those fans who flew out to Honolulu really, really wanted to see a game where there were 63 fouls in it. They showed up to watch those officials work, and they had to get their money's worth.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, hey, I thought tonight watching the second half, something was revealed to me about this team. We're going to cover that here in just a second. So stick with us. Before we do that, though, I do want to take a quick minute and tell you about our sponsor, SeatGeek. We're so excited that they're back with us for their second straight season sponsoring the Assembly Call. And the reason why we love SeatGeek is because buying tickets online for sports and concerts has been a confusing process for a long time. It's always been hard to find the best deal for that game or that show that you want to go to, and none of those older ticket sites really seem to want to change that. But SeatGeek is different. They've come along, they've created this amazing app and website that really does make it easier than ever before for fans to buy and sell tickets, which is why it's the first place I go when I'm looking for tickets to a game or to a concert. And one of the things I love about SeatGeek is they actually do the price comparison for me by searching multiple ticket sites and ensuring that I'm getting the best possible deal. And they'll do the same thing for you too. They do the work, you save the time and money. And best of all, listeners to the Assembly Call get a $20 rebate off their first SeatGeek purchase. So to get your $20 rebate on tickets from SeatGeek, do this. Download the SeatGeek app and go to the settings tab and click add a promo code and then enter the promo code assembly, ASSEMBLY, and SeatGeek will send you $20 after you've made your first ticket purchase. Again, download the SeatGeek app or go to their website and enter the promo code assembly today. All righty. Well, you are listening to a jubilant and enthusiastic episode of the Assembly Call. I am your host, Jared Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips, and Will DeWitt, and we are celebrating and breaking down Indiana's 101-97 victory over Kansas. And I'll tell you, I can't imagine a more stark difference between what happened in Hawaii last year for Indiana and what just happened in Hawaii this year for Indiana. We saw last year in some of the games leading up to Indiana going out to Maui, Indiana really playing well. We saw them just dominate Creighton, play really well defensively, and we thought, hey, we might have something really special here. And I think through the first couple of exhibition games, obviously not competition on the level with the Creighton or some of the teams Indiana played last year, but we started to feel good about this team, OG's growth and the defense that we were seeing. But as soon as Indiana got to Maui last year, we saw a team that was very flawed, that didn't have a lot of mental toughness, that wasn't really willing to dig in and play defense. But what we saw tonight from this Indiana team was a team that simply, when it got down, every time Kansas punched, Indiana punched right back. There was a time in the first half and early in the second half when Kansas pushed it out to a 9-point lead. And you kind of felt, okay, if they can make a spurt here, they can really push this out. But Indiana would never let them. Someone would step up, make a big shot, get a big defensive play, and go right back. It wouldn't just be one bucket. It would be two, and it would be a 5 or 7 point run really quick, and Indiana would get right back in the game. And to Kansas's credit, they did it too, but I loved seeing that from our guys. And it's ironic because you wouldn't expect that from a team that just lost a bunch of leadership, lost its point guard, to have that kind of poise in tough moments, that kind of resiliency. But to show that in the first game against a team like Kansas, that to me suggests something special about this group. And it's only one game, and you don't want to overreact. But I really like just what we saw from this team, the togetherness, the attitude, the mental toughness. And I think that bodes well for this season. Andy, what did you see from these Hoosiers?
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing that really stood out to me was, it felt like it was probably the Notre Dame game last year when it really started to feel like this team bounced back when things started to go against them. And I think, more than anything, we could probably say the same thing about the defense, and the defensive numbers probably don't look great tonight. But I just thought there were possessions where they played great. And what we've talked about when we start thinking about state of the program kind of things is the feeling of you get to the end of the season and then you don't pick up where you left off, but you kind of take a step back. And that step back has varied from year to year, but there's always been kind of that step back. And it's one game and we're all really excited. So, I reserve the right to revisit this potential hyperbole later, but it feels like this team has picked up where it left off. Certainly from a resiliency standpoint, the lessons that they learned last season pay dividends right away. And that, even though the young guys did that, that's something that they're learning from those upperclassmen and the guys that were there and went through, the good times and the bad of last season. And so you'd like to think that, that's an extremely positive sign that resiliency is already there. And this is a game that they'll be able to fall back on later where, we've talked in past seasons about it can be the here we go again mentality. But a game like this is one you can fall back on and say, look, we're without 2 starters to start overtime and everything kind of felt like it was getting away from you. And they came back. And I just thought there were times when a number of different guys made big plays tonight. And those were, in a lot of cases, the veterans. Robert Johnson went on that 7-0 run of his own. Blackman hit a ton of big shots. The veterans seemed to step in and give him a lift when things seem like they might start to get away from him. So I think definitely a positive sign to start the season. I think a positive sign for this team, positive sign for the program, and one that really stood out to me as well.
Ryan, what did you think just of the mettle that this team showed tonight?
I mean, I just let this stat in our show chat that Kansas led for 23 minutes and 35 seconds. Indiana led for 12 minutes and 53 seconds. Despite being down for most of the game, despite playing a veteran team, with veteran guards, who early in the season having veteran guards is a huge key for a team because they can pretty much get you in the right position, do what you need to do, all that stuff. And IU is, they have vets on the team, but it's not senior leadership. It's not guys who've led the team before. And they just kept punching back. I mean, it's a boxing analogy. These two teams, I mean, give Kansas credit, as you said, give Kansas a lot of credit. They stood and toe to toe with Indiana, slugged it out. I mean, it was a great college basketball game. Let's not forget that part. This wasn't IU domination. This was a great finish, great game, but this was an excellent college basketball game, and Kansas was doing everything they could to beat Indiana. And Indiana, you're right, just kept fighting back and just kept clawing for it. And you feel like, as Andy said, this team sort of has some of that character from last year. Now, again, it's one game. It's early in the season. It's in Hawaii. We know how things go in Hawaii sometimes. It may not be indicative of the rest of the season, but you look at this team and you feel like there was no point in that game where it looked like they gave up or they thought, we're not going to get it. And there were plenty of times they could. When Thomas Bryant fouled out in regulation, when Ronald Johnson fouled out in regulation. I mean, those both could have sunk the team, and they didn't. They fought. They found a new guy. They put a new guy in. And they fought back. And you're right. It is a mentality, and I wonder if it's one of those situations where it's the coaching staff too. Feels like after the way last year started, now they're underdogs too, and they're fighting back. And we've said before that Tom Crean's teams always play well when people doubt them. That was the case tonight because I don't know anybody who picked IU to win this game.
The people on this show did. I can tell you that much. Hey, all right. So we have some people talking in the chat about Josh Newkirk, and they're saying things that I disagree with. So we are going to cover him in just a second. And this tweet that Yogi sent out, we're going to cover that too because it's awesome. But we have to talk about Thomas Bryant because, it feels like forever ago that Thomas Bryant was dominating this game because he was relatively quiet in the second half and then he fouled out. And so he didn't have as big of an impact in the second half. But try and imagine that first half without Thomas Bryant and his 16 points and the little 4-point run that he went on right at the end of the half to get Indiana back to where it was a 4-point game. Because if you'll remember, Indiana really played well. Kansas jumped out to the early lead. The game kind of settled in, and then Indiana went on that nice little run to go up 33-29. And then inexplicably, Indiana just forgot how to play offense and started taking long twos and quick threes. And all of a sudden, Kansas goes on this 9-11-point run, and they're up 40-33. And Indiana's kind of teetering a little bit. And that's when Thomas Bryant reasserted himself, and let's remember, playing with 2 fouls because Tom Crean trusted his guy, kept him in there, and I thought Thomas showed that he can shoot 3-pointers, that he can drive, that he still obviously got the skills with the back to the basket, that he runs the floor, and he showed the increased athleticism that we've been hearing about. Didn't look quite as stiff, just looked more fluid and athletic, and I thought in the first half was absolutely dynamite and basically helped carry his team to halftime still in the game, and then everybody else carried us to the finish line. But without what Thomas did in the first half, that could be an 8-10-point deficit for Indiana. And if Kansas comes out and goes on that 5-0 run to start the second half and it's a 15-point game, it's a much different ball game. And I thought Thomas was absolutely great in the first half. Ryan, what did you see from Thomas there in the first half?
Well, I think that he started out a little bit too much on the perimeter, and it wasn't necessarily the offense putting him out there. You could kind of see him floating to the perimeter. And the reason why was because Kansas was packing the paint to try and force Indiana to go to somebody else. And so there wasn't a whole lot of room to operate. And then Indiana started making some shots, including 2 from Thomas from the outside. They had to stretch out, and finally he got to work inside. He went on the offensive glass. I thought he was Thomas Bryant. I mean, that's what it is right now. He's a guy who goes after the ball. It doesn't matter if it's, he's a second chance points guy. He's a guy who can score, if you just dump it down into him, or at least get fouled and get to the line. And he did that a few times tonight as well. So I think that he's one of those guys that is just the team's anchor. I mean, and while he wasn't great in the second half, playing with, foul trouble and all those things, 19 points, 10 rebounds, I'm never going to argue with. That's especially this early in the season. He was as good as we needed him to be, and hit 5 of 7 free throws. One of those I think he'd want to have back because it rattled in and out. And then 6 of 14 from the field isn't great, but I thought there were a couple times where he got fouled and there weren't calls, which was shocking because everything seemed to be called in this game. But he missed 8 shots, but he's a guy who just works, and teams are going to go after him. He's not going to shoot 68% this year, I don't think, because teams are going to go after him and they're going to expect him. And so he's going to have to fight for everything he gets. And tonight I thought he did that while he was in there, but obviously he didn't get a full game in, only 28 minutes, which is not what I would expect from this season. I would expect him to be up around 30 and playing hopefully without foul trouble.
Yeah, I thought, the second half, he was 0 for 4 from the floor, and I thought just throughout the course of the game, he missed some easy shots that I think he's going to make far more often than he'll miss. A couple shots around the rim, I think, with his, tried to lay one up with his left hand, and I think the other was with his right. So I think there were a couple of shots that you're probably going to see him make, and if he makes those shots, who knows what maybe it doesn't get to overtime. His stats look a little bit better. The kind of second half of not making a field goal stuff kind of goes away, but he's still, he had 7 rebounds, 3 of those offensive. I thought he really, worked hard, for what he did get, as Ryan mentioned, and some, kind of weird foul calls, the, double block charge. And then the one that he fouled out on was questionable as well, as were many of the calls. But I thought he did well. And the one play that really stood out to me was his, running the floor, the Zeller-esque like floor sprint at the end of the first half, really cut into a lead. And, IU had, the theme was Kansas takes a timeout, goes on a huge run. That really got IU back in it at halftime. He made a couple dunks there in the last minute or so of the half, which was a good cap for him to a half where he really kept IU in the game. He and OG in particular, that first half, it was all front court scoring in the first half and largely backcourt scoring in the second, as I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more.
Hey, I got to ask you guys a question real quick. Can we get some physicists from IU on this? Can you have a block and a charge on the same play? Is that double foul?
Dude, that was so dumb. They shouldn't have called anything. So their solution wasn't to call two fouls. It was ridiculous.
The one guy on the baseline had, if the question was whether Bragg was set or not, the one guy on the baseline called a block and had easily the best angle of the player. So
yeah, I hate this inclination of referees these days that if there's any contact on a basketball court, it's automatically a foul. Basketball is a contact sport. This isn't tennis. Guys are gigantic and they're going to bump into each other. Sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't get off. Now I'm getting hot. And this is not good. These lights.
Ryan's rant, presented by thebiglead.com. There you go. You got it. Okay, so we're going to talk about OG here in just a second because we got to talk about OG's night. But I want to talk about Josh Newkirk real quick because we got some folks in the chat kind of wondering aloud if he was maybe the one Hoosier that didn't play a good game tonight. And here's what I will say about Newkirk. I thought Newkirk took a few questionable shots. I think he took a long 2 that was questionable. There was another 3 he took in the first half that I didn't think was great. And it wasn't a perfect night by any means. But he had 5 rebounds. He had 4 assists. And I'll tell you, he did have a couple of turnovers. But I'll tell you, I thought the first 2 possessions of the overtime, when Indiana entered the overtime without Thomas, and reeling a little bit, because always, the team that kind of has the lead and gives it up and then goes into overtime, you kind of feel like they don't have the momentum. I thought Newkirk's aggressiveness and taking the ball to the basket on the first 2 possessions of overtime set the tone for Indiana for that overtime. And I thought that was really important. Plus, he had a big steal late. So it wasn't a perfect game, but I thought Newkirk did what he needed to do to help get this win for Indiana. And I thought, frankly, played some big minutes, and I thought he did a good job, especially there in the overtime when, you kind of needed someone to remind the guys, hey, this is what we were doing to get here, driving to the bucket, not settling for threes. And I thought he really did that.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
look, Josh Newkirk just played 35 minutes for Indiana. He hadn't played a game in 2 years. You know, people have to remember that. The guy's a little rusty. It's a little different in practice, preseason. This is a huge game. He's going up and down the floor with two seniors for Kansas in the backcourt, matching straight up with them. He played his tail off. And yeah, he was 2 away from the field. He had some bunnies that he missed, and he has to be a better finisher. That there is no question about that. He's got to get better at finishing, and he's got to make his free throws. But you know what? As far as an all-around player, I love what this kid brings because he's strong, he's quick, he's aggressive, he gets people going. He's not Yogi, tough. And he's very tough. He's not Yogi, and he's not going to be Yogi. So people, I think, are expecting like, you know, a brilliant performance there. We've been spoiled for the last few years. We really have. He is a very good basketball player, and he's going to help Indiana a lot because, particularly defensively, I thought he did everything he could defensively tonight. Kansas was, you know, those guys were on fire, and they were getting a lot of calls, and so they're, you know, I think I saw some people on Twitter criticizing him and stuff. I love what this guy brings. He obviously has to finish better around the rim, but I think that's coming. Again, he hadn't played a game in 2 years. Give the guy a break. Let him play.
Yeah, I just thought he was uneven. I mean, there were certainly moments. I mean, he made there was a time Kansas was up early in the second half. They were up by 7. He scored 5 straight points, stepped into a big 3 and hit it. And so he made some good plays. He made some questionable shot selection, as we talked about. He missed a couple free throws, which is, you know, he wasn't the only one to do that tonight. And I thought he was just uneven. And in a game with the attrition that there ended up being because of foul trouble, they were going to need him to play a lot of minutes. I think there'll be games when he can really excel, and I think there's games when IU's going to want to do things a little bit differently from a lineup perspective that maybe he doesn't play as much, depending on how Robert Johnson and Blackman are going. But you know, I just thought it was an uneven performance. I didn't think it was bad. And in a game like this, he was challenged right out of the gate. And I think Ryan's point is a good one. To step in against 2 senior guards on a top 5 team in the country is a tough spot to get back into the swing of things.
Hey, we're going to talk about OG next. Did OG have a good game, a bad game, or is it like impossible to judge an OG game now because of just this crazy hype, and so we don't quite know what to expect? We're going to talk about that here in just a second. First, I do want to remind you to activate your free Assembly Call membership if you haven't yet. We got the great live chat going on over at assemblycall.com/live. It's a moderated live chat only for our members. We'd love for you to join us. That's one of the perks of a membership, which you can get at assemblycall.com/join. It only takes you like 15 seconds, so it's really easy. And it's how you get our best content, because in addition to being able to join us for the live chat, you get our weekly 6-banner Saturday roundups, plus our detailed post-game analysis emails, which Andy was lamenting earlier because he's still going to be staying up to do that analysis so that we can get it out to you in the morning, because that's the commitment that we make to you. And you know what? After a big win against Kansas, it's not like we're going to be able to sleep anyway, so it's going to be fun putting the email together. But you got to be on our email list to get it. So please go to assemblycall.com/join. Activate that free membership. If you like what you hear here on the Assembly Call, becoming a member is the next logical step. Join us for free at assemblycall.com/join. All righty. Well, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am your host, Jared Morris, here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms, and we are celebrating Indiana's 101-97 victory over Kansas to kick off the 2016-17 basketball season. And let's talk about OG Anunoby. You know, look, we all knew that a lot was going to be expected of OG, but it feels like over the last 3 or 4 days, the OG hype train has just picked up so much speed, with the article on The Ringer and Pat Forty calling him one of the 25 most intriguing people in college basketball, and all the mock drafts, and Sporting News naming him a preseason All-American. All of this. And then we saw what he did in the exhibition game, where he basically shot 100% from the field and was just dominating. And so you look at it tonight, and OG finishes with 13 points, 7 boards, an assist, obviously had, you know, a few blocks, and the huge block there at the end, 3 of 7 from downtown. And if that had been his stat line from last year, which it feels like it kind of was on several games, I feel like we would have been jumping for joy saying how great of a game it was. And yet, and tell me if you guys agree, I left this game feeling a little bit unfulfilled from OG's play. And I think that's a testament. I think that's actually a compliment to him, because I think he's shown us that he's capable of so much more. And it just felt like for long stretches of the game, he blended in too much. And he's too good of an athlete, too good of a player to blend in. And I thought he had some spectacular moments and some aggressive moments and did some good things. But, you know, there's another level there for him to get to. And Look, it's his first game, and that's where I'm saying maybe it's hard to properly rate him, because maybe that's judging him against kind of an unfair standard and not letting him ease into the season a little bit, because I think he did play a good game, but there's a lot of meat left on the bone in a game like this for OG, and maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing for his first game as a sophomore. Just shows how much better he can be, and it's important to remember that he was still pretty good tonight. Andy, what did you think of OG?
Yeah, I thought in the first half in particular, he played really well. I mean, the thing that sticks out to me is he didn't take a 2-point shot in the game. He was 3 of 7 from the floor and 3 of 7 from 3-point range. Now, he did get to the line, made all 4 of his free throws, which was great, but I thought he went to the basket on the very first 2 possessions of the game. I think one was a jump ball, and one he may have, I think he got fouled. That's a reasonable assumption. If you don't remember something about this game, they probably got fouled on the play you're thinking of. And so I thought he did a nice job there, but then, like you said, I thought there were, parts of that where he just kind of hovered on the perimeter. There was the play, and I think it was in overtime or late in regulation when he just kind of dribbled at the top of the key and then tried to take a 3 over Josh Jackson. And it's like at that point, Josh Jackson's got 4 fouls on him. You're getting every foul call if you go to the basket. Like, take it to the bucket. And he had a hard time staying on his feet because of the floor or whatever it was. So that didn't really help. He a number of times was falling down. So I guess I would just like to see from a shot distribution standpoint him end up doing differently. But I thought he still played relatively well defensively. He had 3 blocks. The one at the end of the game kind of just for final emphasis to seal the deal. But I'd kind of categorize his performances uneven in a similar way to what I would say that Newkirk did. I thought he played really well in the first half, and he and Bryant scored 26 points together in the first half. And if they don't do that after the way IU started, the game could have been out of hand, and they allowed IU to hang around. So I think he gets a lot of credit for that. But certainly the second half could have been more.
By the way, talk about balls. OG going up for a block on a 3-pointer when Indiana's up 4 at the end of the game.
Dane Fife was watching that going, no, don't do that. Don't do that.
OG's performance was, to me, I think I'm going to echo what you guys said, but I think I'm going to put it in different terms. I want him to be more aggressive from the wing.
He was at the start. I mean, he came out the first 2 possessions of the game and was real aggressive.
And see, I agree. And I think that's what Indiana needs from him. They need him to do sort of what Troy Williams did and just go at the basket and obviously, hold on to the basketball, but go to the basket. And then, also hunt the baseline, look for lob opportunities, don't clog things up, but if the opportunity is there, go take it. And I felt like after sort of the first few minutes, he got real timid about getting inside the 3-point line. And that's got to change. Now, again, it was the first game of the season, guys, it's, and you can say, well, they played exhibition games. They've been practicing for months. When you get on the floor, it's different. On top of that, what I will say is he was matched up with Josh Jackson for the entire game. And as ESPN said, he's the greatest player who ever played. So it's clearly, but Jackson's clearly a very good player, played OG really well defensively, and OG played really well on him. I thought it was a pretty neutralizing battle from those guys. And also you have to remember that OG, when he's not scoring, he can still impact the game. He had 7 boards, 3 blocks, a steal. He had an assist, and he played solid defensively. So I think that it's the kind of thing where, the pure numbers won't tell you his effect. I mean, he also altered a few shots when guys were driving in, things like that. So he brings a lot, even when he has an off night offensively. And I think it was fair to say he had a bit of an off night offensively. So, it's something to watch going forward to see if he gets more aggressive. But I think for now, at least you've got him on the back end defensively, and he's playing very well.
All right, gentlemen, I would like to hearken back to the very first episode of Assembly Call Radio from a couple of weeks ago on CBS Sports 1430 AM. We have a new radio show now, if you hadn't heard. And
smooth plug, Morris.
Thank you. We had the topic of who is this team's most important player, or I think it was buy or sell. Thomas Bryant is this team's most important player. I believe I sold that and made the case for James Blackman Jr. as this team's most important player. And I would like to put forth as evidence for my argument
on the humble brag, patting yourself on the back. You're really,
yes,
you're really infringing on Ryan's territory at this point.
You've been spending way too much time with me, clearly.
All right, look, you guys are just stalling because you realize I was right, and you have no comeback after tonight, because James showed tonight exactly what I was saying, that what this team needs, this is going to be a pretty good defensive team, I think, when all is said and done. This team has guys to go inside. This team has so many things. The one thing it doesn't have, if you remove James from the equation, is the guy to take and make the big shots late. And he did it. And Andy, I tell you what, you're going to talk about substitutions in the email. I thought Tom Crean coached a really good game, had his team prepared, did a lot of good things tonight. I thought there was a decision that he made late in the second half that may have cost Indiana the game in regulation, and that's when he took Thomas and James out before the 4-minute timeout. Now, I get why he did it there, and he did it on a defensive possession to try and get them rest, but he left them out for a couple of possessions
fouls
after the 4-minute time. Well, James didn't have 4 fouls, did he?
I think he had 3, and Thomas had 4.
I mean,
right, but
I'm pretty sure you had 4 fouls, so he probably did. That's a reasonable assumption.
Okay, but we're late in the game. We're under 4 minutes, all right? And it's at the time, Indiana was up 79-76. And what happened was, with James out, Newkirk took the long 2. Curtis Jones had to take a long 3 at the end of the shot clock. And as soon as James got – and so Kansas gets up 82-81. As soon as James gets back in is when he goes on his tear, makes the 3, gets fouled on the 3. And I say that only to mention he was so important at that part of the game. If I'm Tom Crean, I get taking Thomas out, but I do not let offensive possessions go after the 4-minute timeout without James Blackman Jr. on the floor, because I think he's that important. And I think those possessions without him in those situations underline that importance. So, yes, I'm remaking my point, and now I would like to hear your guys' rebuttal on a night like tonight, because I'm not sure there is one.
You know what I think, Jared? I think every player on the team is equally important. How's that?
Right.
Is that
cut his mic off now.
No, I still think Thomas Bryant's the most important player on the team because he changes what this team can do. You take Thomas Bryant out, and it's a radically different team. You take James Blackman out, and you've got some guys on the perimeter who can do things, and you might be relying too much on freshmen, and it wouldn't be the same as having a guy who at the last second can make an out of nowhere shot and make you look really good after a bad possession. But I just think not having that big man up front changes the game. That's why I said Thomas Bryant. Now, as for tonight, James Blackman was an absolute stud. 26 points, 6 rebounds, an assist, only 2 turnovers. He had some boneheaded plays on defense, but you know what? You live with him, you're going to die with him too. The 26 points, he hit 4 of 8 threes, and you could have convinced me he hit 7 threes. It was so impressive. But the most impressive thing to me was not just the fact that he made free throws late and through the whole game. He hit 6 of 7. The most impressive thing to me is the difference between James Blackman now, and I was saying this on Twitter, James Blackman now and James Blackman as a freshman and a sophomore. He finishes at the rim through contact, something we harped on that he needed to do over and over and over again. He would go up soft, get his shot blocked, not get calls and miss the shot. I mean, he finishes through contact now, and he doesn't look a whole lot bigger, externally just looking at him, but he is clearly stronger. And he is, look, you got to give the guy credit. He's diversified his offensive game. He's much more mature in the way he approaches the game, and it shows. And he played. I would go out on a limb and say this was the best he's played at Indiana, given the opponent. I mean, I
don't even think that's going out on a limb. This is clearly the best game he's played.
Yeah, no, I mean,
except for the Northwestern game in the first round of the Big Ten tournament.
Again, you can pick games where he had more points or he did different things or was more efficient. But this game, given the opponent, the way he repeatedly stepped up, you see a player growing into a role. And that is what was most impressive about it, because that's not something we've seen him do before. We've seen him make big shots, seen him, kind of take over the offense at times. But this was in crunch time. This guy was, give me the ball, I'm going to win this game. And he did it. And in regulation, especially towards the end, he carried the team with those guys out. So, kudos to James Blackman. And yeah, Jared, kudos to you for making that pick.
I definitely thought defensively he struggled early, but I saw improvement even within the game. I mean, there was a play that he really pressured the ball and caused a turnover, and he's never going to be an elite defender by any means, but I thought he was better as the game went on. He had some really bad closeouts early that led to some baskets, but the thing that stood out to me was what Ryan said, just not being afraid to go to the basket. I think that shows he trusts the knee. There was a play that he made where got a shot, went to the rim, got a shot block, was the first guy to back up to get the rebound and put it right back in over a much taller guy. And so being able to get that second jump that quickly, and just his willingness to do that and to finish with a couple really nice and ones there in the game, I thought was great. I agree with you, Jared, though, that that stretch at the end of the game was weird. I got taking them out. I got the extra rest. But after the first time that Kansas was at the free throw line, it seemed like that was a chance to put them back in. They ended up, IU had an empty possession, then they got fouled again, and that's when they, that's when they put him back in. But he just at the end of the game, we talked a little bit about this when we were having some of the OG conversation before the season about, is he a guy that's going to have the ball in his hands at the end of the game, and kind of who takes that part of what Yogi's role was. And I think that became clear tonight. And obviously Bryant had fouled out, but Blackman wanted the ball. He came. There were possessions where, dribbling around for 25 seconds, he's going to go get it. And he made things happen from there, was confident and stepped into his shot. And I thought he was just fantastic. So, kudos to him for coming back. Looking forward to seeing him get just even stronger as the season goes on with his knee. But it's a great sign to see how much he trusts it even in game one.
And the irony of the whole debate, of course, is that Indiana has a terrific triumvirate of players with James, OG, and Thomas. And I'm not really sure any one is more important than the other. I think the three of them together form a great trio that can really take this program to great heights this season. And Indiana needs all of them clicking, on all cylinders. And I thought for the most part, they did that tonight. I want to get to this tweet that Yogi sent out and get your guys' thoughts on it. He says, this team now has way more talent than we did last year. Watch out. And, you read that and you think, well, damn, that team went 15-3, won the Big Ten. They were really good. Two of those players are now playing in the NBA, and Yogi and Troy. But I have read that, and I think I agree with him. Now, the key is last year's team became greater than the sum of its parts. They were certainly less than that in Maui, but became more than the sum of their parts in a terrific team. And that's what we'll have to see if this year's team can do. Through one game, certainly looks like they can do that. And if you combine that kind of togetherness and communication with the talent this roster has, then I certainly think the ceiling for this year's team is higher than what we saw last year. But in general, you agree with Yogi's tweet or disagree, Ryan?
I think I've been saying that all offseason. I think this team is more talented. Whether or not they have the leadership and the intangibles that team had last year and certainly developed as the year went on is yet to be seen. But I think pure talent-wise and depth-wise, oh, yeah, this team is better. I don't think there's any question about that. What they lost was important, but they gained so much more, I think. And the development of the guys who were already here has made them a better team. I think there's no question from a talent perspective, this is a better team.
Andy, you agree?
I think to some extent that remains to be seen. I think it has the potential because of the depth. I think you can go pretty deep at each position. And I think when we looked at it at the start of the season, we said, oh, this is going to be more of a, front court leaning team than we've seen from previous Crean teams. And now it seems more balanced. You've still got those guys in the front court that took a hit with Hartman going out, obviously. And I think the backcourt, the freshmen in particular, have proven to be maybe more ready than we expected them to be. So I think the team's going to be a little more balanced than we thought it would be in the season. And I think if that's true, then what Yogi said probably winds up being the case in the end. But I think from a depth perspective, from a quality depth, even if you get Hartman back at some point, this team could legitimately go 10, 11 deep and feel really good about all those guys. And I think there were parts last year where we probably wouldn't have said that.
Real quick, guys, before we get to last call, I want to talk about the backcourt because the backcourt has kind of been maligned in the offseason. People wondering, obviously the big question mark is Yogi is gone, and Troy obviously played, mostly a backcourt role last year. And a lot of people were wondering, you've got Robert Johnson, who's been a solid role player, but not spectacular. James Blackman Jr. coming off the knee injury. No one knew what to expect from Josh Newkirk. These two freshmen that, again, not the five-star guys that ESPN's going to show on their promos for the game. And everybody wondered, I thought, for the first night out, Indiana's backcourt went toe-to-toe with clearly one of the best backcourts in the nation. And while Frank Mason Jr. clearly kind of emerged as scored all the points. I'm hedging here because obviously he got bailed out with some foul calls, but was a terrific player. But Indiana's backcourt played great, I thought, and I thought Robert Johnson, even though he had an uneven night, that stretch of points where he basically just took the game over and scored 7 straight points, that was huge. At a time when Indiana was teetering a little bit, Rojo and James basically put the team on their back. I think they scored at least 10 straight points. It might have been 12, and that was really big. And I love seeing that both from the experienced guys and the young guys, and I think it really bodes well for this team for the future. Andy, you're obviously the president of the Robert Johnson fan club. What were your thoughts on his play tonight?
Well, I'm disappointed that we didn't get a longer segment on him earlier in the show, but we'll take the opportunity now to talk about how he played. No, I mean that 7-point run was fantastic, and I thought I think there was a play after that where he almost scored again. I thought he was a good mix of stepped into 3-pointers confidently, but also was really good at attacking the basket, and so he spent a decent amount of time on Josh Jackson early, which I thought he did a decent job defensively, contributed to how he played. And the biggest thing that did not go well for him was the 2 missed free throws there down the stretch, and then the subsequent foul on Frank Mason. But really, I thought other than that, he played a really strong floor game, did the kinds of things they needed him to do, didn't go out really hunting shots. He only took 6 shots for the game, made half of them, a couple rebounds, 2 assists, and just 1 turnover. And the turnover piece was certainly a big one that we had, with him. And he managed to play a lot of that first half with 2 fouls as well. We talked about Bryant doing that, but he played a decent chunk of that first half with 2 fouls, really hung around, gave some stability, and only ended up playing 21 minutes on the game because of foul trouble. But I thought he was really strong. And I think you feel, like I said, you feel in total a lot better about the backcourt than we did even 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago before we saw this team play any games.
Yeah, because this wasn't, the backcourt looking good against UMass Lowell. This was against Kansas in a huge game, and everybody stepped up, which is what was so great to see, including, of course, Curtis Jones. And we have to talk about him again, the freshman, 15 points in 16 minutes. Ryan, some final thoughts on Curtis Jones?
Well, first of all, I want to apologize. Earlier, I called him Ronald Johnson. Look, folks, it's late here too. Okay, it's
like 6:30 where you are right now.
Yeah, about that. No, I'm not in Hawaii, unfortunately. We know what happened last time I went to Hawaii with Indiana.
You're banned.
Yeah, exactly. Curtis Jones, just, what I loved about it was just how aggressive he was. And that's what we saw from Devontae Green in the preseason. And we saw a lot of that from him in the preseason and in scrimmages and things like that. But we hadn't really seen it from Curtis Jones, and he came out ready to play, man. He absolutely did. 15 points on 5 of 10 shooting, 3 of 6. I mean, he did not shy away from stepping into shots, made those 2 enormous free throws in the overtime, especially with, Robert Johnson out. He really filled that spot well in the overtime, and it didn't feel like there was a big drop off. He played well defensively. I mean, look, Johnson's one of the better perimeter defenders we have, and Jones stepped in and played very well. So, I was just impressed with him, how he came in and he was not shy. And that's sort of the thing you get about these freshmen. They're just not shy. They want to play. They want to belong. And, that and the way that everybody rebounded were 2 of the biggest takeaways for me from this game, as I said earlier.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, we're about to go to last call. Real quick before we get to last call, one more quick reminder that a great way to support the Assembly Call is by ordering your official Assembly Call t-shirt from HoosierProud.com. Go to HoosierProud.com and check out their selection of unique, stylish apparel that anyone with Indiana roots will love. And don't forget to use the promo code ASSEMBLY for 15% off. It's not just on our logo t-shirts, but on anything that you order, your entire order, you get 15% off for being an Assembly Call listener. So do that, ASSEMBLY, for 15% off. And again, the URL is HoosierProud.com. All right. Well, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am Jared Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. We are wrapping up another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. The 2016-17 season could not have started out any better than with Indiana knocking off Kansas to begin it, 103-99. Just another fun, entertaining game involving Indiana. I mean, if you're a big network, I don't know how you can't just be clamoring to have every Indiana game on that you possibly can. Because, I mean, there's really nothing more fun in college basketball than watching a game with Indiana. But let's go to some final thoughts, fellas. Our last call. And Andy, we will go with you first so that you can then hop off and begin marking down all of these lineups.
Well, that is not something I'm looking forward to. So let's stay on longer and talk more about the game. When you look down the box score, you got 5 guys in double figures out of 10 guys who played. Nine of those 10 scored. The one who didn't was Freddie McSwain. He grabbed 2 rebounds in 4 minutes. And you don't play in a game like this against the top 5 team. And Kansas, regardless of what the outcome of this game was, is a top 5 team. And overcome the fouls and all those things without everybody making contributions. And I think that's what's exciting to see, is that there wasn't anybody on the team who it seemed like the moment was too big for, from the freshmen to James Blackman coming back from injury, to all the guys we've talked about up and down the roster. And I think that's going to make for an exciting season, because these guys can really play, and they're only going to get better. When you think about even hearing some of the comments from Crean about the things they haven't even really installed yet, what they haven't gotten to, this was just a lot about heart, a lot about hustle, and seeing those kinds of things this early in the season are really exciting. And they're only going to build after a win like this, as these guys start to see, this is what we can be early on. So I can't think of a better way to start the season, unless this game had tipped off at like 3:00 in the afternoon, so that we'd had a little more time to talk about it, and it wasn't nearing 2:00 in the morning here. But other than that, I can't think of a better way to start our latest season of the show in the regular season, and hopefully a little bit less tense moments against UMass Lowell coming up this week.
You think? Yeah, maybe just a little. I know Kansas is flying over where to New York to play Duke, and we're flying home to play UMass Lowell.
Yeah,
that's a topic for another day. Ryan, last call.
With the danger of getting political, and that's not what I mean here, man, it's great to have basketball back. Just with everything that's going on, no matter what side of the fence you're on or whatever, this has kind of been a crazy last week in the country, regardless of who you are, whether you're super happy or super sad or whatever. And it was just so nice to watch a basketball game and enjoy it, and get my mind off of whatever else is going on. And I really want to thank Indiana and Kansas for putting on that show, because it's something else for us to talk about. And as a writer, it's been really hard this week as a sports writer to find anything to write about, because nobody cares about anything else than what's going on. So getting a great basketball game to watch was something that really helped me today. So thank you to those teams. Thank you to our service members who the game was supposed to honor. I think that it's a great thing that they do every year, playing that game and sending two great teams to go play there, and letting those guys get in and watch it and enjoy it. And they got two great games to choose from. And I love this team, and I love watching this team, and I love being able to bring this show to you, especially on a week like this where everybody's focused on everything else. Let's enjoy this team while we can, and let's have a great season.
Absolutely. Well said. I was reading some comments from Tom Crean in the run-up to this game, where he talked about the possibility of doing a home-and-home with Kansas again. If you remember, Indiana used to play Kansas regularly in the non-conference for about a good decade there, back during the night years. And all I can say is, yes, please, more of these games. It felt so good to be in a heavyweight matchup like this again. And the beauty of a game like this is it was a no-lose situation for Indiana. Now, obviously, there's a huge potential win when you win a game like this, and Indiana did. And we need to underscore, I'm surprised we didn't talk about this, but we need to underscore the importance of this victory. With so few opportunities for Indiana in the non-conference slate to get a big win, this one is huge. And this is going to be sitting there on the NCAA tournament resume for the rest of the season. Every time Andy's doing his bracketology, this win is going to be there propping up Indiana's resume and helping to balance out the rest of the strength of schedule in the non-conference, which isn't very good. So it was a huge win for Indiana. But more importantly, it's just so great to be a part of these heavyweight matchups. This is where Indiana needs to be as a program. Of course, winning these games is great, but just playing in them regularly. And so, any opportunity that Indiana has to get in these games and to play more of these games. And I know, people are looking now at Michigan State's schedule with their young team, and they're, saying, man, Izzo must be kind of regretting having this schedule. But I bet he doesn't, because he has the schedule every year, and it always seems to work out for him. And so whatever Indiana, whatever you can do to get in more games like this, I speak on behalf of everybody, literally every IU fan, when I say, yes, more of these games. And as an IU fan, I remain the 11, 12-year-old that I was when I truly, when my IU basketball love truly formed. And of course, for anybody who loved the 1993 team, we always remember the loss to Kansas in the Elite Eight that ended the run of that great team. And all I have to say is, every time subsequently that we can beat Kansas, nothing will ever erase the painful memory of that loss, which I carry with me to this day. But it helps a little bit, and it's just kind of nice. Helps vanquish that memory just a little bit more. So thank you, Hoosiers, for helping to quash that memory just a little bit. It'll never truly die. Andy, I know you agree with me. But it's still, man, it's good to get a win over Kansas. Man, it's good to get a big win to start the season. And it's good the way Indiana got it, because it suggests this is going to be a team that we're really going to love watching. It's going to be an up and down season. We know that. It's going to be a roller coaster, but we're really excited to share it with you. We're glad that you've joined us. Let's go have a hell of a season together, shall we? Let's do it. All right. Well, we will be back with you. I believe the next game for the Hoosiers is Wednesday night against mighty UMass Lowell. That game is on the Big Ten Network. I believe it starts at 7 o'clock Eastern. Most of those games do. We will be here right with you on the postgame show afterwards, as we always are. We hope that you will join us. We will talk to you then. Way to go, Hoosiers.